Welcome back or welcome to your Product North Star podcast. And today we're really, really lucky to have with us Matthew Hawn. And Matthew, please, if you wouldn't mind, for the listeners or the viewers, however they're consuming this podcast, if you wouldn't mind giving them a little bit of context of who you are, because I know we had what I thought was a really cool talk just before we got started.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Matthew, and thank you, first off, Ross, for inviting me onto this podcast. So I always tell people that I'm a product manager or been in product management or product strategy, probably for the last 20 years. I came to it from kind of an unusual angle, probably. I started off as a journalist in San Francisco in the early 1990s, in the earliest dot-com days when pretty much it was the full employment act for liberal arts majors, right? Technology was just looking for people who could write and speak well. So I got pulled into that point, and I started off as a journalist in San Francisco, working for Macworld magazine. I helped launch MSNBC when it first came out, the 24-hour newscast. I helped build a television program. And at those days, my title wasn't product manager, right? It was producer or, executive or something like that. We didn't use the term product manager. It wasn't until I moved to New York in the late 90s and joined Universal Music, kind of, I think, in 1998. I joined them and became a product person, and it was probably more of an accurate sense at that point. It was the year that we hit the Napster iceberg, so it was a good time to come in to be all things digital. This had been an analog company trying to face the digital world, and so that was my first entry into that. After like a long time at Universal and at Sony Music, I joined Last FM in 2010, where I was VP of product there. And then there were a couple of other stints at places like the BBC and Samsung and some startups that I worked with before I joined Audio Network in 2016. And I'm now the chief product officer there.
Awesome. So, that must be pretty unique. I know that there's a lot of kind of tech that you've kind of thrown in there, but tell me how that's been different from the usual kind of, the typical Marty Kagan product management school of thought. Whatever that means.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I never liked it. There's all kinds of different product management people. Like when I joined the record company, a product manager is the guy who makes sure, or the girl who makes sure that your product gets to market, right? Make sure the CD gets in the shops. That's what a product manager is. So for music companies, it wasn't something that they understood the way that a Silicon Valley company would understand it. Media companies in general don't have product managers, right? The product is the TV show they're putting on. It's not the other stuff that you're building. But as more and more companies have had to build software to change their businesses, and as Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world, we are in fact seeing, software has eaten almost every industry I've been a part of. Media companies have been turned upside down. And so, if there's any kind of connective tissue between all this stuff, it is that no one really knows what I do when I tell them I'm a product manager in the companies that I've been at. And it's almost always been a fight to explain what that means in that company. Usually a positive fight, but it's always a bit of a wrestling match.
Wow, that's really, really different. So, Matt, how have, as you've moved over to the technology and software side, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had? Sure.
Yeah, I'll go back to the music ones, and the music ones are the most fun in some cases because I joined Sony Music in 2002, I think I joined them. And one of my first jobs was to figure out how do we build a product for radio and media companies. How do you get those promo music out to radio stations and to press and everybody? And at the time we were doing this, classic thing where you shove CDs in a bag and you mail them out to people. It was quite expensive. Sony is spending millions every year to send these out worldwide. And me being the, clever tech kid on the block, I'm like, this is great. We're going to build a digital system. It's going to be based on iPods. We're going to digital deliver all this stuff. And it's a really cool thing. We built it. We did this thing really fast, had a cool prototype, and I take it into the head of promotion at Sony. And I'm not going to name him because I think he eventually went to jail for payola or something. But he was a classic guy in the production space. And he basically said, "Fuck you and your product. This is a horrible fucking product." And he said, "I'm like, what do you mean? This is great. This is solving all your problems." And he's like, "No." And he said, he picked up a Jiffy bag off his desk and he said, "Do you know what goes into this?" And he says, "Here's the CD," puts that in there. He says, "This is cocaine. This goes in there. Here's some money. This goes in there. Can your digital distribution deliver that stuff into these guys or not? Because that's what I need you to do." And I'm like, that's not what this is meant to do. But it was a great reminder of, your product's there to do the jobs to be done, not the jobs you think you're there. They didn't need music delivered faster. That wasn't the problem. They needed there to be status behind the delivery of that. There needed to be influence. There needed to be, the coolness of having a stack of CDs on your desk if you're the programming director for, KXP in Seattle, right? You needed all those things. And we missed that, and so that's classic product gaps that you often find. Like the problems you think you're solving aren't really the problems you're solving. And I think that was important in music especially, but it was a really good early product manager problem to learn. Was rarely is it that you're trying to solve a very straightforward problem. And it's one of the reasons I love jobs to be done so much, right? The job that your product does is very rarely the features of things you have in it. It's more how is this used by your customers? And for the most part, music companies didn't know their customers. I mean, I spent most of my 8 years at Sony, miles from our customers, close to our distributors, right? We had 400 distributors everywhere. But it wasn't until the last couple of years of my career at Sony where I really got my hands on customers. So the first half of it was, fighting through the slog of executives and promotion people who all thought they knew what they were doing on this and not really getting to what customer needs were or what fans were. My last couple of years were much better, right? We had a chance to build a direct-to-consumer business where we really got our hands on, and that business was a fantastic, within a year we'd done 30 million in revenue because fans were desperate to get the music and desperate to get access. And it was a really great product, but it really did teach me that I had to leave the record industry, and that's what took me to Last FM after that.
Cool. And tell me about the last couple of years, Matt. I mean, so from that journey, from what I'm hearing, it's a lot of, say, struggling with trying to understand what the actual job is to be done, but also moving over more and more to the software side. So how was that journey for you? And tell us about the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, so just before I joined, the real revelation for me was getting to work with really great agile teams. While I'd been working at Sony with good, solid developers who could work in agile or extreme programming, it was really until I got to Last FM where we had a real shift in just ways of working and mindset, where I had, essentially self-directed teams in data, in front-end design, in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We were starting to do that. Our Last FM was an early recommendations and music and information retrieval technology company. They were really solid and ahead of the curve at that. But it wasn't until I had those technology people to work with that I realized the potential of, and as you said, Marty Kagan would call it that triangle of technology, design, and purpose, or viability, feasibility, and usability. Until you really have that triangle of those folks, you don't know what you're doing in product until you do that. So that's really, really where my career took off, I think, is more. I really started thinking of myself as a product manager and less of a product owner or a, business manager for problems. I really, really started getting into what the software could do, and how do you build a team that can do that, and how do you build that capability. At Last FM, it was tricky because in some cases, it was still coming out of a founder-led culture. And very often in a founder-led company, especially early-stage startups, you have a really strong product visionary, usually in one of the two founder seats, a strong tech and a strong product visionary. And that's what Last FM had too, right? They had a really strong, senior lead who knew what they were building. And, but really what you ultimately want is not to have that cult of personality in your company. You really want is to be able to, you want a more leader culture. You want a culture that says, we're going to talk about our North Star as a company, like, where are we going? What are the objectives? What are the high level goals? And then you want to trust and empower your PMs to become, experts in their areas, not the CEO of the product. I'm not into that bullshit. I don't have time for that. Really, these guys are more conductors than they are CEOs. But when they're at their best, they're bringing in cross-functional teams together. They're bringing those things together and they're putting in front of technical people really juicy problems to solve, right? A problem space to explore, right? A problem space to dig into where we can do the discovery, where we can really understand what the problem is, understand the 4 or 5 different solutions, go quite wide in those, and then narrow it down to the thing we want to experiment or the thing we want to try or the bet we want to make. So for me, that was a big shift, right? Being able to move into not a list of features I was trying to deliver, but really outcomes we were trying to deliver, starting to build that kind of a culture that would take, the phrase I like to use with everyone was fall in love with the problem space, not the solution that people were putting in front of us. How do we fall in love with that space? What are the areas we can really explore in that before we even get to delivery? And that was really when it changed for me. And for the last 6 years at Audio Network, it's been building that team. It's not a big team. There's only 6 PMs in total there. It's not a big development team. It's a mixture of in-source and outsourced developers, probably about 30 people total in the team. But kind of pound for pound and the number of things we're getting done and the viability and the outcomes we're having have been quite strong. The company had a fantastic exit in 2019, and we're moving from strength to strength.
That's awesome. I mean, I know you're saying like it's a 6 PMs or isn't that big, 20, 30, whatever, isn't that big, but it's still sizable. I mean,
yeah,
there's still huge challenges that you would have had with those 6 PMs or scaling them up. Do you mind talking a little bit to that? Like, what are the challenges that you felt, and were there any challenges that you felt were either specific to your vertical or that go across most horizontals? How did you find that?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is, like I said earlier, music companies aren't really designed to think of themselves as the product, right? We were originally, when I was first brought in, they didn't have a product team. And so there was no product people when I got there. There was a product owner who was telling a dev team a list of things that they wanted them to build, and until you really start to back up from that and you start to build a culture of, understanding the customer journey, understanding the phases your customers go through, understanding the jobs to be done on it, and you can really document that, then you can start to figure out what parts of the problem you're going to attack. And so, while it started slow, there was a couple of product people. The challenges I think we mostly faced was getting people to understand that we were all playing on the same page. I had marketing teams saying, no, this is us. We do this part, and sales, no, we do this part. You guys are here to deliver things for each of these things. No, you guys understand this has to replace, your goals have to be common goals, shared goals within the company, and we have to have the same ones. And that was hard. And that sounds pretty basic, right? I mean, we all should all be pulling in the same direction, but it's really difficult in product teams that don't get that established early, that you have the sense that this is going to be a product-led company or a customer-centric company, rather than and built on the customer journey, not on marketing's goals this week, which could be somewhat disconnected from a sales team's goals.
And how would you kind of resolve those kind of stresses between sales and products? I mean, I was talking about an example today where I used to work with this great enterprise sales dude, and he was always really interested in the tech. But I remember saying, what is about 4 years ago, 5 maybe, we were talking about, like, he was like, what's the next big thing? And I was like, chatbots. We were talking about all this stuff. And then he came back a week or two later going, yeah, I've just sold like one of the UK's biggest retailers. I'm not going to mention their name. Like, I've sold them on our new chatbot solution, and we're going to do chatbots for them. And I was like, dude, I haven't said anything like that.
Yeah. It is a tricky one. I mean, I think that, this is the tough thing with a sales organization, and this is a B2B versus a B2C kind of difference, right? With a B2C company where you're trying to build a consumer product where your customers are really direct and you're selling direct to customers, is very different than when you have a sales organization or account-based selling where they've got a promise and they've got a client relationship. And they're often very protective of that client relationship. I mean, kind of rightfully so, right? The sales team is your best surface area to the customer in some ways. So if you don't, and it's really difficult. I mean, they're out there trying to sell something and they want something new each time. And it's really difficult to kind of go back with the same story. Like, oh yeah, we improved our conversion rate, 5%. They're like, yeah, that doesn't make the sales guy anything better to sell. He doesn't care about that. So you really do have to balance between the things that will delight a team like that, and to be able to lay out a vision for people. And this is where I think product roadmaps do have a place. I know there's a whole lot of noise in companies about, oh, you can't have a roadmap, right? We're agile. We only do things 3 months ahead of time, and we're super adaptive. And you often have to lay out a vision for where you're going. That doesn't mean you're going to get there exactly in the same way or with it in this particular car, but you have to be able to say, we're going to drive from New York to California, and we're taking the southern route, right? That's our path. Now, we might go through Albuquerque, we might go through Santa Fe, we might take a detour to Utah and see Bryce, right? I don't know. But we have a plan, right? One of my favorite product guys is Scott Belsky, and he talks about data being a compass, not a map. And I think that's really important, right? People expect the map to be very specific. And the compass is a better metaphor because you use it to course correct as you go. But you have to get them on side. You have to get those salespeople on side, and they have to trust, and they have to be part of your process. And that means workshopping with them and doing customer interviews with them. And The hardest thing and the biggest challenges was getting them to accept to have my product people come out on sales calls. Like, no, I don't want you to talk to them. You guys, this is my client relationship. I don't want you talking to them. Or you might say something that could hurt the relationship, and you might ask them about things they don't like, and all these real risks that you need to do as a product person or as a user researcher. They really were protective of those customers, and everything was like a game of telephone, right? It was like I'd say, Cindy, tell me what your customers want. She's like, well, they want this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, well, how do you know that? Like, what's the evidence behind that? She's like, well, I talked to them. Like, can I talk to them? No, you can't talk to them. Trust me, I know what they want. And that, that game of telephone is inevitably never going to get you what you need. So you really do have to get people involved in that. And the earlier you can get those, rather than saying chatbots are the next thing, you probably would have gone to the client with my guys and said, okay, tell me what you want to be using these chatbots for, and let's get these guys involved in what the next big thing is. And let's see if there is something there. And let's let them trial it out with us and see if it's worth it, and if it's also viable as a product.
100%. I mean, because honestly, who cares about chatbots? If the client doesn't care, or if there's not a job to be done, whatever, which it actually wasn't. But
or they pay for it, right?
Sorry?
Will they pay for it, right? I mean, that's the other thing. I think we always forget to ask that question, right? We often ask, hey, is this usable, or do you like this? Like, that's cool. But yeah, would you pay $1 for that? Would you pay $50 for that? Would you pay $500 for that? We rarely ask that question as products. I mean, we should be asking a ton more, right? But really, that should be part of the usability testing we do, right? Is this a big enough problem to solve? And is it enough that makes it worthwhile for you? Would you stop using what you're using now to replace this? These are all questions I think have to get asked ultimately, more than just usability questions.
I totally agree. I mean, and it's an area I'm really, really passionate about. I got into many, many years ago, actually before I was doing some other more kind of creative things. I was actually trained at IBM as a technical pre-sales engineer, which is really a sales engineer rather than a technical stuff there. But the interesting thing there was asking, are you interested? Great, cool. Would you be thinking of developing it? Would you be willing to put in a pre-order? Don't worry if we don't end up developing it, we'll refund you, or whatever it is. But basically, what they're trying to train us to do is be a lot more like salespeople, because I think, and what I've seen, and I've seen it quite recently, is product people. I don't say they con themselves, but they believe the clients. And if the clients are going, yeah, I love this feature's great, I'd love it.
Yeah.
That's cool. And then you go, and they never take it to that next very, very uncomfortable, in their mind, kind of more salesy side, going, okay, awesome. And it's going to be $10,000 a year. You still love it?
Yeah.
Still want it?
Yeah.
And then, actually, we don't love it so much, really. Or the usual kind of, we would struggle to find the budget, maybe, blah, blah, blah. Because I've had so many product people who either reported into me or delivery people, and they're like, client loves it. Client says they love it. I'm like, that doesn't, whatever.
It is. I think it's a particularly senior manager problem, a senior PM, or senior product person problem too, right? Is you ultimately do have to tie back to those clear goals and business goals. And I had a really great user researcher who's like, I don't really care if it's viable or not. I just care if it's usable or not. And I'm like, well, then you're only getting part of the story. I can't ship something that doesn't make us money or that doesn't have the potential to add value to the company. And so being beautiful, I mean, I want ponies and ice cream on my birthday, but I don't always get those, right? That's things I want, all those things. What do they need and what will they pay for are really important aspects of what we get when we have to build stuff. And that should also be a big part of your prioritization process, right? I mean, we hear all sorts of stuff about, impact and confidence and effort scoring. And I'm a big fan of the ICE scoring method, but really part of that impact has to be commercial, right? And I think that more PMs have to be commercial. We have to continue to be commercial. And yes, we're the voice of customer, but equally we're in voice of the customer who's paying us, right? And from the voice of the customer that will return value and grow the company and keep everybody employed.
100%. And I mean, I was talking to a recruiter the other day. We were talking about scaling up teams. And the one thing he said that he thinks product people miss is they don't think about things as much as, say, salespeople would.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's pretty much, and I remember, one of my more kind of successful engagements, I remember we pretty much reported into the commercial director, the CRO, the chief revenue officer. And his thing was always, like, okay, as product people, have you done a competitive landscape review? Do you know what the competitors are doing? What is their messaging? How did this compete with that? And he was always like, you product people, I'm paraphrasing here, he was like, I'm sick of you always telling me that what you're doing is you're a unicorn and there's nothing else like it. And he was like, yeah, but what's so different? There isn't really this exact thing. And he was like, sure, but like, Facebook or Netflix, what is it Reed Hastings was saying? Like, we're not competing against Blockbuster back in the day. It's like we're competing against sleep. We're competing against the fact that other people could be going out and spending time with their friends or whatever it is, right? So if you're busy thinking, no one has quite got our product perfectly the way it is, therefore we're unique. We're in a unique space and this lofty, amazing space, and we don't have to do that work. And it absolutely amazes me how very few product people will actually keep an active update on what their competitors are doing and how the competitors messaging, competitors pricing, or they might have done it and they did it 2 years ago, put it in a drawer and forgot about it. Now they're unique again. Have you come across that kind of stuff?
I definitely. I mean, as much as I love my guys, the number of times I had to say, get out of the fucking building and go see some people and get out and see what the world's out there like. Go sit with an editor. Because our music is used by film and TV editors, and go sit with someone and see what they do. You realize just how much of their day they give to the music part. And frankly, it's like we think it's the center of the universe, but when you really look at the customer journey, we're at a couple of key points in that customer journey. And until you really understand that whole, and this is back to the truly, if you're doing jobs to be done and not just shit that people want, you understand what your product does and where it has value. You should know that, right? You should know that that's a big part of it. And I do think when jobs to be done is done well, it always includes that. I always tell the guys to look at 4 points of data, right? The operational data of like how often are people literally, what are they clicking on? Not the quant data of what we're being used. I tell them to look at the qual data, right? We always have to have the qualitative feedback coming in and the customer feedback, and they have to be looking at all that stuff. They also have to be looking at the market base, just what you're talking about. Do we understand that market? Do we understand what's going on there? And then there's a third less tangible one, which is like, who's going to fucking eat our lunch, right? Who is coming at us out here in the corner and who's coming after us in this space? And you should know that. And that's curiosity, wrapping up all four of those areas of quant data, qual data, market data, and just, frankly, it's instinct and gut and understanding of who's coming for you. And a little bit of who's hungrier than you is understanding that and understanding where that's going to come from. It's how you keep from becoming complacent. Because you're right, it's really easy to stay in your bubble of like, I saw my data, I saw my A/B results. We're making progressive stuff, and we're making incremental changes, but you miss the fucking comet coming out of left field, or the iceberg I talked about earlier, right? That Sony missed the value of what was coming when I was there. And when Napster happened, we were at the peak. I mean, if you look at that point of when the music industry was at its peak in record, it was exactly the time the Napster hits. And then the progressive slide from $40 billion company to about a $13 billion industry happened over the time I was there. And while digital music was coming up and we're now kind of returning to that space, you would not have found people in the building who were really smart. I'm not going to say the music company people aren't smart. They were just complacent because they've been making so much money and people love our product and they're willing to pay 17 pounds a CD and all this shit. But they never saw, it's classic innovator's dilemma. You never see the people coming for you if you don't put your own boats out in the water. But, you've always got to be out there.
Join Metallica at that stage. I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess, and even piss, or Metallica can piss off all your customers. Yeah, no, there are so many mistakes that music companies made in the time I was there, right? I was next door to guys who made really dumb ones, and at some point, after the 8 years I was there, I saw there was a red dot above my desk, and I'm like, what is that red dot? I'm like, oh, that's where I've been banging my head against the wall trying to get this to change, and it's when I knew I needed to leave and get out of the business.
Yeah, and I mean that is some advice, because I get asked this a lot. We, a colleague of mine had like a kind of a career accelerator, and for product people, and a lot of what we're doing, a large percentage, I don't want to give a number, but a large percentage of the advice is really, you can't fix the problem you're in, or your company's wrong, or you just can't fix Sony, you're one person, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You got to move on. Sometimes you just got to kind of take your losses and go, whatever. Like, I'd love to fix it. It ain't fixable, at least by one person, and I can't get the ground cover, whatever it is. And I think the same goes with kind of scaling product teams. A lot of the time,
no question.
when you're trying to get the right people or bring them on board and get them to do certain things, like we can talk about great frameworks and value frameworks, and we've got our product scorecard methodology and other things. But you know what? If the senior leadership and other people don't buy into it, it's just no one's going to listen, right?
Yeah, and I won't say. I mean, this is very prescient in the sense because I'm actually about to leave the company I'm with now, and Audio Network's been a fantastic ride for 6 years. We've built an amazing team there, and the team that's there, I know that the next step for me in my career is somewhere else. Not because they aren't an amazing company, they're doing phenomenally profitable well, but my next thing isn't there anymore. And knowing when to leave. The phrase I used with my team was like leaving the party when there's a good song on the radio, right? On the stereo. You don't want to go when it's falling off, right? You want to leave before.
And you definitely don't want to be the last person kind of being.
No, and I don't. And this is not a company that's going to fall off a cliff, right? It's in a good place. And they've got good stuff, but for me, it was important to realize that I have to be hungry and have to know what comes next for me, and that's going to be a different company. And I think that I always tell my team, like, when your goals and the company's goals are no longer aligned, you have to go. And that could be, as you said, from a perspective of like, what do we do in product, or who's the new owners? Like, we've just shifted owners, so there's some new people who own the company now. And so, my look at that, all those things decided eventually to say, look, this is no longer my fight. There's some really young people who want in my team who will probably be promoted and are very excited about what they're going to do next. But I think that's really great for them. But for me, the next thing is not with this company, even though the 6 years have been phenomenal, right? We went from, huge double digit on growth and fantastic exit from the company and some great stuff. But really, at some point, you do have to recognize that sometimes you need to change horses.
So, I mean, not in any reflection of them anyway whatsoever, but what do you see your next challenge being? I mean, what's exciting about you as your next challenge?
That's a good question. I mean, I love working in ML and AI. I mean, I really do. I think AI is way overused. And I think, especially in music, I think the idea that we're going to have robots writing hit songs is a stupid idea. But when you think about all the places you can use machine learning and information and tagging and all kinds of really good stuff, I see some really exciting products on the horizon for using machine learning in music and maybe even making new instruments and new options, right? In the same way that 808 synthesize changed the way the music happened. I think this is going to change the way people create music. It's not going to replace them, but it's an instrument, right? It's going to be a really exciting instrument. So that's one of the areas I'm excited by. I'm also excited by, and I say this cautiously because I don't really believe in a VR or a goggled universe, but I am excited about what happens with the entertainment space in how we create film and TV now, right? What's happened in ILM. With the volume, which is an amazing technology that now projects and uses the 3D game engines like Unreal Engine in Unity to literally create the environments that people are acting in. That kind of world is going to just turn everything upside down. And while it may not be a 3D universe where you wear on your face, anymore, but entertainments are going to change, media is going to change, creative people are going to change. I'm a huge fan of what Scott Belsky said lately about at Adobe about how we're all going to start to move into a 3D world, and how do you manipulate and create 3D objects? How does creating 3D objects become as natural to you as you creating, photos on your phone has become? We've all become videographers and people with our phones. What happens when you do that in 3D space? What happens when you can create in 3D space? So I'm excited about all those areas. Those are going to be really fun areas to be in, and the companies I'll look for next are going to be, I think, in that space.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time to do and to be in that space. My daughter turned 10 about a week ago, and my brother-in-law was showing me Oculus Quest 2, and showing me Netflix in there, and sitting there and looking like you're in this amazing cinema. And I was remembering back to the mid 90s when we were programming. There was the language called Vermal, virtual reality.
Yeah.
And I remember back then just trying to encode some polygons and trying to work out the X, Y, and your Z space, and to see how far it's come. It's absolutely amazing. So
it really is. I mean, libraries of universes of this, and I don't know how your kids are. My kids are 11 and 16, and their ability to just move fluidly in that world and to create and do that is just going to create. The next is Francis Ford Coppola is a 12-year-old girl, manipulating 3 objects, right? That's who's going to be the next filmmakers of the future. And so if I can be in that world and help them build tools and help them build content and tools that make that'd be a really cool cool way to spend my next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, my daughter's 10, and I mean, it was amazing just seeing like her just teach her granddad, my dad, like, oh, you need your iPad set up. And I was thinking, like, should I help my dad? And I was like, oh, it'd be so much easier if she just does it. And she's a lot more patient than me. So, like, granddad, like, Saba, granddad, she was like, you do this, you do that. This is how you get your Kindle, and you do this and you do that. Of course, the next day he called me and goes, well, where's that Kindle thing again? I was like, why are you calling me? Call Eve. She's your IT department. Yeah, cool.
Totally.
So where do you? So that sounds like you've got some like exciting stuff around AI, ML, virtual reality, and kind of augmented reality, whatever, whichever kind of three-letter acronym I can throw into the mix here. Tell me where do you see like the biggest challenges or the most rewarding challenges with growing the actual team?
I love building teams. It's actually one of my favorite things, right? To create the safety and the ability to create an environment where you have great people who can explore this, where you can empower them to do the things that I guess Daniel Pink talks about, the autonomy, the mastery, and the purpose, right? How do you have all three of those things in your team? Because that's when people outperform. I've never believed in rock star developers or rock star designers, right? I think that what that is a cult of personality that gets you locked into one person's vision, and when they go away, you're fucked, right? But really great teams are teams. They're self-organizing, they're self-directed. And to me, when you're creating that environment, where you create the environment for that to happen, that's incredibly rewarding, right? How do you find those people? How do you find the right personalities? And I just use the phrase psychological safety, but that's really critical. How do those people feel like they can fail, and that the people above them, right? And I generally am at the C-level at companies now. And so as a C-level executive, my job is to defend that concept and to make sure that I keep all the shit from coming down to those guys that would break them out of that mold, and also making sure the clarity is coming down on our vision and our strategy. So I give them clarity, and I give them the technical competence to do what they can do, and I hire the right people, which is tough, right? It's tough to hire people in this environment, as you know, right? There's a lot of jobs competing. We're in London, where fintech companies are paying crazy money, and even if we're paying at the mid-range to that, we're not paying equity at some of those points. And these companies, people join these companies not just because of that, but because of what you give them as the environment they work in. Can they do their best work here? Can they, understand, can they move their craft forward? Will they be able to make decisions and not just be, shoved in a corner like a server farm, right? Being asked to ship code, and I think that if you can create that environment, that's the biggest challenge. You're always going to find low performers and high performers in those groups. Always. And the low performers you politely introduce to the door and find them other jobs at places that are less demanding. And the high performers you give more accountability to and more responsibility to and more credit to. But you really have to continue to do that. And that gardening of a team is probably the most rewarding thing when you get to the senior level, right? You've got to keep doing that. And it's hard for my ego sometimes too, because I like to build shit. I want to get in there and say, oh, I know the answer. Let me do this. And like, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's saying, hey, are you set up to do that workshop? I know exactly how I would do it, but I'm not going to jump in and step into that. I used to do that a lot in my early careers. I would be way too hovery over people and do the work with them or even for them sometimes. And the more I get away from the idea of like laying the environment, coaxing the best performances out of them, coaching to get the right stuff out, that's what's becoming the most valuable part of this part of my career.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I used to do that as well. I used to just say, just hang on, let me help you. I'll just do it for you. Yeah. And I was like, okay, great. Now all I've done is increase my load. I haven't really helped the person. They haven't struggled through it and gotten where they need to go. And sometimes it's, you kind of, that thing of, could they do it as 100% as well as me? Maybe not. Maybe they could. Maybe it's an ego thing. Maybe I'm biased, but it doesn't matter. Even if they can't. Yeah. Doing it 80% as well, 70%. That's cool.
You get to ask the question too, right? You get to ask the question to help make it better, right? I've had a number of people come to me with something that's 80% of the way. I'm like, let me ask you 5 questions that'll get it to 90, right? Let me ask you 5 things that'll get it to 100, right? And everybody likes to hear that, right? That's because what you do is you're building on their goal, not coming in and tearing their shit up and starting with and saying, here's how you should have done it. It's really helping them to make their work better. And that if you do that right, that's as rewarding as having come up with the original idea yourself.
Yeah, I always like the idea. I mean, with my teams, I always like the idea of kind of, it's like like team, units. It's like kind of individual units and maybe kind of product units, company, as they look at it. And then within that small unit, how can we put them through some kind of crucible? In other words, do something really hard together, and they come out, and then things are, now you're a bit of a team, you've been through something. Easy to say. I think it's hard to do.
It really is. I think, and you have to do it outside. I mean, the thing that we discovered was it wasn't enough to do it in that triangle of product developer designer, right? That wasn't enough. You have to do it with the people, like you said earlier, with the salespeople, with the marketing people, with the customer support person, with the person recording the music. We do all of our music at Abbey Road Studios, and one of the things we had to do with my team is like, you guys have to see how the music is made. You have to see how amazing we are at doing this and feel that, right, before you can make anything. That's one of the ways we forge it is by what you make. For music, it's a lot easier, I think, than if you're making, soap flakes or, something kind of like actuary software for bankers or something. That's a little harder. But when you make something that hits people here, it's a lot easier to get people to feel that they have a mission. And I think that that's part of it, right? You do have to have a thing that people believe in. You have to understand and empathize with the customer problem too, right? And feel that pain that's going to make someone pay for this or love your product or care about it. And until you do that, until you have that empathy and that curiosity for those people's worlds, you can't do it.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, Matt. And I'd love to see people getting into product from more kind of go-to-market or not just product marketing, but like sales or enterprise sales. And, like you're saying, like, hey, install Pro Tools, mess around, GarageBand if you kind of, that's all you got, mess around with it, install whatever stems or whatever it is in your software, but play with it, use it. I remember hiring somebody doing mobile apps, and they were like, oh, this guy's brilliant. They know everything about mobile apps. I'm like, but you didn't ask them the question if they ever created like an Android app. They were talking about the iOS app. They never actually spoke to the Android app. And maybe it doesn't matter. But the question is, do they have that domain knowledge, and are they interested? Do they have the curiosity to go, I don't know, but let me find out. Let me check that out. I had some amazing experiences early on as well with like sales teams bringing me in and saying, okay, Ross, teach the sales team about the products. And they were intense. Their questions were great. The questions were more intense than like a lot of the, let's say, the producty style questions or product marketing style questions, which seemed like a lot more softballs, because these guys had to go out there and kind of represent it and pitch it. And if we couldn't make them confident, the clients weren't going to get it.
B2B businesses that have a sales organization, that they should be your first stop as a product person, right? You should live the life, follow them, go on sales calls. They're almost always my favorite way to learn about who's using our stuff and to talk to people about it and to see the real pain points. And so if you're not doing that, you really aren't doing your job as a PM. And I can't, like I said this earlier, you have to get out and see them. And I started making all these guys like, tell me who you saw this month. Tell me, take a day off. I don't care about your backlog. I don't care about your, list of stuff you're writing up. I don't care about your roadmap. I care that you have spent time with a customer, and not just sometimes it's putting software in front of them. Sometimes it's putting some, prototype or something in front of them. Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's empathizing. Sometimes it's just being there and saying, hey, just take me through your workday. So you see the bits that you're like, man, that would have never come up because it never touched our product, but it was 80% of that person's day. Watching people swap files around in an editing suite was hugely influential on me, because I'm like, man, the music is tiny files compared to the video files. Sure. And the music was actually really easy for them. They're like, but the video was a bitch, right? They're all this time for rendering and all this other stuff they were doing. And I'm like, they're only spending about 5% of their day on the music part of this. And I'm like, in my head, it was 100%. Like, oh, this is the most important part of it. Music's critical, or at least 50%, right? It wasn't. So until you do that, you're only getting part of the picture.
Sure. And I think one of the things that clearly comes across to me, at least in what you're saying, is, you're clearly passionate about it, so it'll come across to your teams. But I think there's a lot of product leaders that I've spoken to or worked with, and they really don't have that interest in talking to sales. And I don't mean to be ultra critical of them, but, I've worked at organizations where no one talks to customers. We'll get some feedback from marketing, and just nobody ever wants to actually, they don't even want to ask sales to jump on a sales call. where the sales would say yes or no is different. Like you spoke about kind of get out there, building credibility and stuff. But there's so many people that I've worked with that it just doesn't even become a conversation until you kind of start banging, as you say, banging your head or banging them on the head, maybe kind of going, guys.
Yeah, you have to do it. I think that, and there's also, I think, a way to get the curiosity is one of the things I always hire for, right? You can train most of the, as you said, train frameworks, train methodologies, train all kinds of stuff. What you can't really train is someone to be curious or empathetic. You find that in the first 10 minutes of the interview, you know that this person listens and actively is a listener and connects with people. And those are the great product people, in my experience. And you want your team full of empaths, and you want your team full of curious people and passionate ones. And I've got some cranky ones too. Don't get me all wrong. They're not all like sunshine and rose. That's not what they are. But what they're always is they're relentless and wanting to know why. And they keep digging into it, and they want to know what causes something the way they work. And you can set them on any kind of problem. Is it the product problem, or is it that's the really good ones are the ones who will find that. And you can't train that. You have to find them.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember working a while back with a guy who, in the beginning, I was like, I found him disagreeable. I was like, why do I have to set an agenda with you before I put a meeting in? Why do I have to, like, you're asking almost everything? And then I was like, at the end of it, I was like, thank God for him, because he's asking questions that I'm missing. And he's filling in things that I should have asked. And I'd like to think vice versa. I like to think I was kind of looking at a bunch of things that he might not have been. Maybe that's just upping myself a little bit. But at least I could see in the beginning, I was like, oh no, this guy's going to be a pain in the ass. Then it was like, maybe he is, but that's a good thing, because he's saying, actually, Ross, I want this. He was very pedantic, and no, I want that. And I don't think we should do that. I remember saying kind of like, are we creating value for a customer? He's like, well, let's define value. What is value? And I was like, that's a good question. Like, let's create a value framework for this particular customer. In the beginning, I thought maybe that's like, is he just asking these questions? And I was like, oh, you're right. We're talking about value as if it's a word that everybody else understands. Like sales might go value equals X percentage closed sales, right? That's value. Go to market might mean something else. We might think jobs to be done value. And it's like that whole word value. And then we created this whole framework. What value was for us, which was, and I remember having conversations with some prospects there. People were interested, and they were like, "Oh, we're really interested in it." And I remember going to him and the team, going, "Are they really? I mean, they're saying they are, but they're not." It's like the mouth. They're talking the talk. They're not walking the walk. They're saying, "Oh, we love it. This is great." But if you could just talk to us in 6 months, we don't have any real resource to it. I'm like, okay, so that's a no, because it's actually not a yes, or it's a let's kick the ball just far enough down the line that we're not saying no, but when you come to us again in 6 months, we'll kick it down another 3 months. So we've never said no. We've just played the political, pass the hot potato type of thing. And I think a lot of product people are kind of going, oh yeah, no, they're really into it. And I was like, in what world are they really into it? It's anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right about the continuing to define your terms. I think is a really different kind of curiosity. Are we all saying the same thing, right? I think I said earlier on that product stuff is almost always about chaos, right? You're taking a chaotic, messy problem almost always, and you're trying to come to clarity, right? In digital signal processing for audio is, finding the signal and the noise is your job, right? And so if you always have the same perspective, and this is why diverse teams matter, right? Having people who are not shaped like you, don't come from your cultural framework, don't come from your mental framework, right? The best people I've hired have been nothing like me, and particularly as a white guy of this age, I really need to making sure that I'm not the only guy in the room making decisions. We just have, the world is too diverse and the world is too interesting to not view that as a superpower to have a diverse team. And I strongly believe that is a superpower if you do it right. And it's true of class, it's true of race, it's true of mindset, right? It's just all different things you need to be pulling it in. And you need shapes that fill in your gaps. Absolutely.
Cool, Matt. Cool. Okay, listen, I really appreciate your time. I think this has been absolutely interesting. And I love the fact that you're coming at it from a different perspective. A lot of people we've spoken to have just, come at it from a product, from a software perspective. I love that you've come at product from a, music industry, and it's been really, really great getting to know you, and I really appreciate it. And Matt, if people would like to find, you're really welcome. If people would like to find out a little bit more about you, if they want to, or maybe even reach out, where should they go?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Jukevox. That's Jukevox on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I'm Matthew Hawn. I think I'm one of the only Matthew Hawns there. I'm in London, so the Matthew Hawn in London is probably the one you're looking for on LinkedIn.
Cool, Matt. I'll when we do go live, we'll post a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. And again, I really appreciate you being here today, and look forward to reaching out and connecting with you again in the future.
Thank you, Ross. Take care. It was really fun. Thanks.
Cheers. Hey, I hope you really enjoyed that chat with Matt Hawn. I think the guy is absolutely brilliant. And a lot of what he has to say about scaling teams, I found really, really interesting. I think there were also a couple of really interesting stories there specific to the music industry. But I think what he said as well is about finding a niche and something that you're really interested in, AI, ML, whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality, going forward. I think there's so many lessons that I think we can take away from that conversation with Matt. Check his stuff out. I think he's had a really, really interesting career, and he was a really awesome guy to talk about. We also spoke about one of my favorite bands, the Sisters of Mercy, before the podcast started. So that was a nice kind of personal thing for me. But I really felt that when he spoke about how teams can work together, gelling, there's a lot of interesting takeaways there. And I really hope you enjoyed it, and looking forward to having you with us next time on Your Product North Star. Bye for now.